Hello everyone! In this lecture, we'll learn how to set up top stitch, a crucial element for making t-shirts look even more realistic. Adding top stitch will significantly boost the quality of your work. Let's start by setting up the top stitch. Select top stitch from the object browser in the upper right corner of the screen. Set up the basic settings for top stitching in the property editor. First, select the type. Marvelous Designer offers two rendering methods. The first is the OBJ type, where each individual stitch of the top stitch is generated as a 3D object. This creates very realistic stitches, but results in much heavier file sizes. The second is the texture type, where the stitches are displayed as image textures. This keeps the file size light and ensures a smooth workflow while still producing very realistic results. For this tutorial, we'll use the texture type. Next, set the offset parameter. This determines how far the stitches are placed from the line where they are applied. First, set it to 2 millimeters. Now that the basic settings are configured, let's apply top stitching to the collar. Select the Segment Top Stitch tool from the top toolbar in the 2D view, then click on the bottom edge line of the collar. This will display the top stitch along that line. Once the top stitch is added, let's make more detailed adjustments. To edit a top stitch, you must select the specific top stitch you want to edit from the object browser each time. When selected, the detailed settings will appear in the property editor at the bottom right. You'll find an item labeled Specification. Length is the length of one stitch, and space is the length between stitches. Lower values for length and space create a denser, finer top stitch for a delicate finish. Higher values create coarser stitching with wider spacing, giving a more casual appearance. Next, adjust the thread thickness. Marvelous Designer allows you to input thread thickness in various units. Use whichever unit you're most comfortable with, and adjust the thickness while comparing the 3D window with a real t-shirt. Next, set the thread color. In the Material section, you can select your desired color from the color options. You can match the thread color to the fabric for a subtle finish, or use a contrasting color to add a design accent. Within the Material section, under Type, you can select the thread texture. For a standard t-shirt, selecting fabric matte is usually a good choice. However, for designs you want to emphasize, experimenting with different colors and textures can be interesting. Check the 3D box to express the degree of fabric indentation caused by the top stitch. Real top stitching pulls the fabric with the thread, which creates a slight indentation. Enable the 3D option, then adjust the intensity and thickness values, and observe the results in the 3D view. Since collar stitching is often composed of two top stitch lines, let's configure this. The setting to change the number of stitches exists in two places within the property editor. The stitch count at the top of the property editor is used when each top stitch has different colors or materials. The number of lines under configuration at the bottom of the property editor is used when all top stitch lines share the same color, material, etc. Since both top stitch lines have the same color and material this time, we'll use the number of lines under Configuration. Change the number of lines to 2. Setting number of lines to 2 displays a new field called distance. This controls the spacing between the 2 stitch lines, so set it to 3 millimeters. In the 3D view, you should now see the 2 top stitch lines spaced 3 millimeters apart. This completes the realistic twin needle stitch. Next, we'll add top stitching to the hem and sleeve cuffs. Now we'll learn a technique for placing top stitching using internal lines. Hem top stitching typically consists of 2 parallel lines along the folded edge. To position the top stitches accurately, first create internal lines. Switch to the Edit Pattern tool, right-click the hemline and select Offset as internal line. In the dialog box, set the distance to 15 millimeters and create 1 internal line. If the internal line shows up as a red line in the 3D window, it might be distracting. Uncheck Show Internal Lines from the top menu. Internal lines exist, but are not displayed on the 3D view. Since we've already configured the collar's top stitching, we can reuse those same settings. Select Copy on the top stitch in the object browser to duplicate it with all the same settings. You can rename the duplicated stitch by double-clicking on it. Give it a clear name, like Offset 0, to make it easier to manage. Select the duplicated top stitch, then in the Property Editor under Configuration, change the number of lines from 2 to 1. To position the top stitch directly on the internal line, change the offset from 2 millimeters to 0 millimeters. Select the Segment Top Stitch tool and click on the internal line lines you created at 15 millimeters and 20 millimeters. This will place 2 stitch lines precisely at the hem. Using the same steps, create internal lines under the sleeve cuffs and place top stitch lines there. Once you've applied appropriate top stitching to both cuffs and the hem, check the overall balance.